Perfect. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Launch No Code podcast. I'm your host, Natalie Furness, and today I have with me Rosie, the master of communities and the founder of Rosieland. Hi, Rosie. How are you doing?
Hi, Natalie. Thanks for having me. I'm good, thanks.
Awesome. Well, I've been following you for a while on Twitter, but we haven't had the opportunity to meet. And the first question I ask all of our founders here is really, how did you stumble across this bubble or world that we now call no code?
Oh, yeah, no code. Big question. Um, I've been doing no code for years, like even before it was called no code. So like going back to when I first started building communities, I was, looking into tools and using all the tools that I could get. I'm very much not a programmer. I'm a little bit technical, but not that technical. Um, so like back in like 2007, like there were these cool tools coming out. So I would explore them and, have lots of fun and build stuff. Um, but yeah, I guess like officially since it's been called no code, like once it started getting that name no code, I had just started at Indie Hackers. And it was probably through Ben Tossell, I think, and all his work. And he was kind of active on Indie Hackers. I think he did a podcast. He started MakerPad and all of that. So I kind of followed along with interest um, with all the no code stuff. So yeah, that's kind of me. And then yeah, I guess like Indie Hackers, there's quite a balance there of developers and no coders now. So there's always like really good discussions going on, and I learned a lot just from I guess leading the community there and like consuming all the discussions. So that's quite handy from a kind of learning perspective.
Yeah, sure. And I mean, you sort of talk about back in like 2007. I mean, what were the kind of tools you were playing with back then?
Yeah, I mean the stuff I guess back then it was like Google Reader. There was like I think Yahoo Pipes. I remember. Um, as a way to like I can't even remember what it did now, but it was like connecting stuff. I can't remember. I need you should go Google it. Yahoo Pipes. Um, and when it came to communities, I was using WordPress. I would class that as no code. I was using plugins. I was trying to glue stuff together. Um, I used Ning, which is still around, surprisingly. But Ning was like a forum, hosted online forum platform, community platform. And like at the time, it was like amazing. It was like, you just like sign up and start a online forum. And I was like, yes. And I did that. And that's actually like how I ended up building like my first business was kind of based on this kind of no code forum software, and that was Ministry of Testing, which ended up,
Awesome.
yeah, that ended up being my bootstrap business.
Well, talk to me more about that because I mean, we're all about, talking about how people are launching businesses no code. So, talk to me about this first venture. How did you come across it? What was the idea? What was the problem you were trying to solve? And what happened to it?
Yeah, I mean, what was the idea? The idea was I loved playing with the tools, so it was just like an excuse to play around. To be honest, I was a tester at the time. There wasn't a lot out there for testers, and I wanted to build communities, and I wanted a chance to explore. So the best way to do that for me was just to go and build it, um, and have a play around and see what I could make of it. And I was just playing, to be honest. I didn't have this like grand vision at the time. I just kind of felt like there was a need to connect testers, and I just started doing it, and I did it. And then like 1 year became 2 years, and I kept just like nurturing it. And like after 3 years, I kind of it had gained enough traction for it to for me to it was kind of taking up my time, quite a lot of my time. So at that point, I can't remember how many members it had. It was probably something like 10,000 members, and
Wow.
I just, it had been around long enough, and I had had enough of a reputation for me to kind of, decide for myself, well, am I going to continue doing this as just like a side project that doesn't really make any money, or am I going to go in? Do I believe in myself enough to like make a living from it? And yeah, that was around 2010, 2011. I decided that I had to make money, and then yeah, the rest, I guess, I guess is history. So decided to do events. So when you host events, it's not very tech heavy. So again, like I would kind of glue stuff together with a forum, with a WordPress website, with PayPal, with event ticketing software. I would just like look around, see what was around, and I did one event. I think it was 2012. We hosted our first conference, and then that was like 60, 70 people. And then the next year I hosted another conference, which was slightly bigger. And then the year after I did another one. And yeah, it's kind of like that snowball effect. And by the time I got to like 2018, that was probably our biggest year. Well, no, actually, pre-COVID was our biggest year. I think was it 2019? We did 9 events throughout the year in the States. I don't even want to name all the countries. It was basically 9 different countries, from the States to Europe to Australia and to New Zealand. So yeah, that was our venture. But I think the thing is that as I was building it, we started with no code, and I guess a lot of the tools are still no code tools. But as we grew bigger, as we got more money, then we were able to kind of start investing a bit more into the tech. But I think, to be honest, is like tech these days is always probably going to be a balance of no code and like custom stuff. Well, not always, but as a business grows, for us, we felt like we had to custom build some of the stuff. So that's what we ended up doing, but it's still very much integrated with no code tools such as Discourse.
Yeah, I think that's a fair comment to sort of say that, there's no harm in going into something and building your minimal viable product or your minimal viable service or whatever you want with that no code stack. Go in. I mean, you had a very niche specific, audience, and it's great that you had that persona to, develop your ideas and your brand behind, and you're really supporting that one key group of people, which is really great to hear. I think there's a lot of founders that want to go out and help everybody, and therefore don't necessarily get the positioning right for any target group, whereas you had your testers. You were a tester, so you could very much empathize with the pains and struggles that they had.
Yeah.
And then building for fun, and it became of value, so you started charging for it. And was it the tickets that you charged for, or did you also offer sponsorship? How did you sort of go up and scaling that from a monetary point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of experimented with a few like membership ideas in the early days, but they kind of never worked. And I think it was too early on in terms of where the internet was as well. So like the idea of events was something that I felt like testers needed. There weren't any events there, or good events in my opinion, for testers. And yeah, I basically just like decided that they needed it, because I didn't do what like people call like validate an idea, or anything like that, because like I felt like I knew who my audience was better than anyone else. And some of this is that I only realize in hindsight, to be honest. But basically I had spent years hanging out with the community, and when you do that, you're going to become like the number one expert for your community. And I had asked people like, would you go to an event? Would you go to a conference if I organize one? And most of them said, no, I wouldn't. Why would I do that? But I did it anyways, because I thought that was what the community needed. And I guess Was I right? I guess I turned out to be right, but I don't think it's about being right or wrong. It's like, about putting in the graft and, and kind of making things happen. So yeah, I mean, events basically was our income, majority income. So a mixture of ticket sales and sponsorship. Like, we'd have sponsors of events. But to be honest, I was always really bad at doing sponsorship, and I always had kind of dilemmas, kind of selling sponsorship, because I refused to do a lot of things that a lot of sponsors wanted us to do. So yeah, huge.
Tell me, what's one of the craziest things a sponsor asked you to do that you had to say no to?
Well, it's not about crazy. It's just about like my beliefs in what would make a good event,
Mm.
and sponsors wanted to like own the list of attendees to spam them afterwards. They wanted to get up on stage and do a sales talk, and they would want to basically overtake an event. And I just always had that philosophy of we can't. That's not how these events work. And as a result, it means that quite often you just have to turn away opportunities because of that. But again, I think in hindsight, again, that's kind of what made the event a success. Is that I refused to do that, and people kind of noticed that. If I had like accepted those like sponsor terms, I don't think we would have grown nearly as much as we did.
Yeah, sure. And I think that's a really important thing for everyone to think about is almost that brand safety, keeping your brand safe by knowing as a founder, what is my vision for this brand? Who am I serving? How can I provide quality to them so they keep coming back? Because it's all about serving those people and offering them value. And, if those sponsors are gonna depreciate the value of your brand, then long-term strategy that's not great. So it makes sense. And just going back to that point of the fact that people said that they didn't necessarily want to attend but ended up attending, that just shows that some people don't know what they want until it's put right in front of them. And I think you know very much as a community we can be putting stuff out there and just seeing if it takes off. Sometimes a conversation doesn't give you the truth,
Yeah, definitely.
and that's great to hear that you did that. So I'm going to sort of move on a little bit to the indie hackers story, because I know lots of people know you very much from the indie hacker community and sort of the stuff you're doing on there. And lots of people have said to me that you had a very unique way of community management. And I mean, do you think you had a unique way of community managing, or were you just being Rosie?
I was just being Rosie, I guess. The Rosie way, um, the Rosie effect. Sometimes it's been referred to. Um, so yeah, I mean, it's like I fell into communities. It's nothing. It's not something that I knew was like an option until like I started like running a meetup. Um, so yeah, to be honest, I don't know. I know, and I know like a lot of people look at me and they're like, "Oh, Rosie" and stuff, but I don't know what to say. I just like I do things my way. I like to give. I put my heart into things. Um, I very much believe in doing the right thing. I'm not the most organized person, but I get stuff done, and I focus on getting stuff done, and focus on like doing what I think matters. And yeah, I mean, I guess like when a lot of people talk about community building, I don't necessarily think they talk about the things that matter. And for me, like when you're like leading a community, especially like a community of practice, so Ministry of Testing was like a community of practice to me. Indie Hackers is a community of practice. It's like I feel like you have to immerse yourself into the community and really kind of understand everything that they care about and everything that they're talking about. And that's just like something that I've done from day one. And it doesn't happen overnight. So like with Indie Hackers, I was an indie hacker, but I was very much an out of touch indie hacker. So I'd like spent like 10 plus years building up Ministry of Testing. But like as the years went on, I kind of stopped keeping up to date with what people were doing in like the indie or the startup world. I kind of, just lost track. Like, life gets in the way of these things if they're not a priority. So I had to spend like, I guess like 6 months kind of getting comfortable with indie hackers and what they were talking about, who's who, all the names, all that kind of stuff. It's not easy to kind of familiarize yourself with a whole new group of people. But I think like once you do that, and once you kind of develop a bit of a process around that, you can, if you tune in enough, in my opinion, I kind of call this like studying your people. But if you intentionally study your people and take note of what they're talking about, then you can really find ways to connect with them. And that's basically what I do in a very kind of broad sense. Is I study people and then I look for opportunities to raise them up and like bring them together as best as I can. It's a bit vague, but
No, that's awesome. I mean, I can relate to that so much. And I think it is important to remember that human beings are individuals, and we can segment them, we can put them into characters, we can put them into personas as much as we like, but at the end of the day, human beings are individuals, and we need to very much communicate with them on an individual basis. And yeah, I very much enjoy watching your work. And I think maybe it's best we move on to Rosieland then, which is your big venture, I suppose. And I think you're doing quite a bit. I've heard that some people are joining you in a sort of masterclasses or some sort of community to learn how to build communities. So talk to me about Rosieland.
Yeah, I mean, Rosieland is like, it's a bit, it's a funny name, right? So Rosieland was just meant to be a blog to start with. So when I stepped down from Ministry of Testing, I wanted to focus in on communities as like something as my niche, I guess, to just like focus in on and like become an expert on. And like the first step for that for me was, well, I need a newsletter or a blog or something. And then it was actually Indie Hacker who told me that the domain was available, Rosieland. And I snapped it up. And to be honest, I've used the term Rosieland for years to refer to like this like space in my head where I go off to the clouds. So that's like the reason behind the name is like it's this like crazy space in my head. And that's why like the logo, has a cloud. And the first version of the logo just had the cloud, and then I got like a rainbow added to it for fun because I like doing that kind of stuff. And yeah, I've got a version of the logo with like all the weather, like rain and thunder. But the rainbow one is like the most popular. But yeah, I mean, it started just as a newsletter to begin with, a curated newsletter. I'd spent a lot of time building communities, but I had never hung out in the community building world. So again, like taking how the approach of how I build communities, the first step for me was to understand who my people were. So I spent like 6 months just solely focused on a weekly curated newsletter, just with a few links every week.
And what did you build that on?
Initially, that was Substack. Oh, I used MailChimp actually for a while, and then I moved over to Substack as kind of Substack started to get a bit more popular. Yeah, so at the time I just had like a card landing page and then MailChimp, and then I moved from MailChimp to Substack. And then I ended up getting rid of the card landing page and just kind of more focused in on just Substack. And yeah, I mean, the focus for me with all of that was to kind of get to know the community building world, to get an understanding of what was out there, who was out there, and developing that habit of kind of just publishing one thing every week. And and yeah, so I did that, and then so I did that for maybe for about 9 months, 10 months, and then I had that habit. I believe a lot in building habits, so I had that habit of doing that every week. And then the next stage for me was, right, I've got all these ideas around how to build communities. I need to write about them. And I tried for like 2 or 3 months to write stuff, and I just couldn't do it. I couldn't like publish consistently or anything. I just like, procrastinated and all of that kind of stuff. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to make a paid newsletter. And that will force me to write. So I switched on paid on the payments on Substack just over the weekend. I wrote something and I published it, and I actually got a subscriber on the first day. Someone like I totally didn't know. They just like signed up, and I was like, oh, okay, interesting. I'm gonna have to write now that I have one customer. And then I announced it a few days later, and I got like my first 10 customers, which was pretty cool. But yeah, I guess like with that, so I started that, I think it was July last year, and I've published something every week since then. I've had guest posts as well, and yeah, it's pretty amazing, to be honest, what publishing consistently can do. It's brought a lot of opportunities, and doing a course now. I'm right in the middle of doing like a cohort course. I never would have imagined doing that either. Like me doing that kind of stuff. I've never done it before. So yeah, it's just like, one thing after another. Admittedly, like doing the cohort course is like pushing me on the edge of things at the moment. It's like really testing my limits. Because I started a new job at the same time as doing a cohort course. Which I probably wouldn't recommend, or I wouldn't do it in the future. But we're on week 5 or week 6, so I'm going to survive. I will survive. We're almost there. But it's been great. Like from a confidence perspective, I've done some videos for them. I've never done videos before, so it's like very much kind of outside of my comfort zone, which is what I wanted. Even if it feels, even if it's like stressful, it is stressful. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, Rose, like listening to you speak, it sounds like that been this kind of like you have a love for something, so you act upon your love for something to serve the people, and people appreciate that, which opens up new opportunities, which means you then act on the opportunities.
Yeah.
I mean, do you think that kind of sums up your approach to launching Nocode?
Yeah, I just do stuff and I think about it later, or I regret it later sometimes. But I think overall, just like this idea of just like doing stuff in my own way, at least, has been amazing. I did that for Ministry of Testing. I grew that to a 7-figure business. I still own it, and all of that kind of stuff, which has its pros and cons. But yeah, for better or worse, I just do stuff. Yeah, and yeah, I guess like my poor husband has to like accept the things that I do sometimes, which is kind of funny. But yeah, overall, it's a really positive experience. My current job is very much a result of my work as well with Rosieland. So I very much believe that if I wasn't doing Rosieland, I wouldn't have like the job that I have now. So yeah, I mean, it's like do stuff your way, I think, and like stop worrying about like being perfect or being like someone else. There's a lot of stuff that I don't do very well, but I kind of just focus on shipping. Like with my newsletter, I know it could be much bigger. I know it could have loads more subscribers. But to be honest, I don't really care. Because at the moment I'm just focused on shipping stuff and doing good work. So yeah, like the email list is like at 2,000 subscribers at the moment.
And are they paid subscribers, all of them?
No, so there's like 2,000 in total, and it's just over
Hmm.
100 paid subscribers.
Wow, that's
Yeah,
and what do the different subscribers get? Like, what's the difference between the paid and the free from your point of view?
yeah. So yeah, little bit. I'm in the process of transitioning away from Substack, just for a bit
Hmm.
of extra confusion. But when I started
Where are you going?
a custom built forum, like really
Wow.
simplified custom based forum, which you can actually see on rosie.land at the moment. So we're just about there, moving people over. Um, I just need to set up like the email list properly. I'm going to be using ConvertKit. Um, so yeah, I mean, like a newsletter has been great, but I'm all about community, so I need something more community focused. Um, so yeah, but like I know that like if I had had the time or the energy or who knows what, I could have like done a much better job, grown a lot more. Um, fixed, had done better customer support, all of that. I'm far from perfect in many of those things, but at the moment, it's like it's not really my priority. So yeah, in time I'll grow, and I'm confident that it will kind of like keep growing. But yeah, just like new job that I started just under a month ago. Um, which I could have pushed back, but they were keen. I was keen to start sooner rather than later. But yeah, there's only so much I can do, right? So it is what it is.
Sure. Exactly. So we talked a lot about your journey and your backstory, and we've mentioned bits of tools along the way. But I'm interested to know what your current stack looks like. I mean, no code, low code, or code. I'm quite interested to see what you use for each thing at the minute.
Okay, so I guess bearing in mind that moving away from Substack,
Hmm.
so I've got kind of simple custom-made forum, which is going along the themes of what I call a community digital garden. Um, So I'm basically building the community and content in mind with like long-term longevity in the content for usefulness rather than trying to push for lots of conversations. I want to kind of have important conversations and make information easier to find, which is why I ended up wanting a custom built tool because I mean I looked at all the community tools out there and I just didn't I didn't want any of them. And it's not because yeah,
Let's delve a little bit deeper into that. I'm interested in hearing your perspective on the tools that
yeah,
exist. So, I mean, I don't know them that well. I have heard of course, we have Slack that everyone likes or dislikes. We have the Circle. I mean, what other tools did you sort of test and decide weren't good enough?
yeah. I mean, I guess like I have this idea stuck in my head, and like when I get something stuck in my head, I find it really difficult just to let it go. So I have this idea in my head that I want a community digital garden. So for that to happen, I need a place where I can post content, organize content, and have control over that content with a long-term view. And it's not that any of the other tools are bad. I mean, I still use Slack for stuff, but like it just has a different purpose. It's not like the main home for my community. Like we use the Slack for the cohort course, and that works well um, for what it is. Um, so when I say like none of the other tools were good enough, it's not like having a dig at the tools at all. It's just like I'm being very picky about what I want, and um, none of the other forum type tools or content type tools were doing it for me. And part of it is the functionality, another part of it is the messiness of it. It's like I didn't want to be, just jump into another tool and then maybe having to move in a few years' time. I wanted to like make this commitment to building something special with Rosieland. And for me, that there was no tool out there that would serve that. And part of it was the tech, and part of it was, well, I actually have no idea where these companies are going to be in 5 years' time, and I don't want to invest into that, into the direction that they might go. So I'm just going to build my own.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense very much with the way that you work, Rosie. You have your vision, you have your strategy, you have the way it's supposed to be, and you follow that, and that's such an inspiration. And I'd say, it's really interesting the way that you built no code to qualify the audience, to qualify the idea. You made little actions, whether that be, a Substack newsletter, or even, MailChimp to start with, and you built your community first. You built the people who you are then going to, deliver value to. And at that point, when you've grown that community large enough, you've then gone and chosen to build something that's bespoke for them. And I think that's such a smart way of doing business, is building that community base first and then building the solution for them.
Yeah, and you need that in communities. You need the trust. You need to, it's not as communities is like the tools are not what makes it success. It's just having the trust with the people that you're with. And I keep saying this, like in the stuff that I write. It's like to have a community, you do not need a community tool. You just don't. I mean, people, this is what, like, when people want to start a community, the first thing they think of is like, oh, I need some kind of community tool to have a home for my community. But you don't. It's like you can have an email list, and you can use that to build community. You can use Twitter. You can use that to build community. All you need is some kind of way to communicate with people to build community. And I think people, have just don't realize that. But when I tell them that, they're like, oh my God, yes, you're absolutely right. So, I guess it's like my mission to kind of help people build better communities by kind of really forcing them to rethink the steps that they're taking. And, I'm always telling people to just stay away from the tools. It's not what you need right now.
Amazing. So thank you so much, Rosie. And you heard it here first. You don't need tools to grow a community. You just need to become part of a community to build a community. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Rosie, on the Launch No Code podcast. Just for our listeners, would you like to share a little bit more? They might be able to find you, reach out to you, contact you, or join one of your communities.
Yeah, so you can find me mostly on Twitter. I'm there like every day. Rosie Sherry on Twitter. And then there's Rosieland, which is rosie.land.
Awesome. Well, thanks for coming on today, Rosie.
Thank you for having me.
Right, to all of you that are watching the live stream, I don't know if there are many people out there, but if you have any questions now, then please feel free to post them on the comments, and we will get them asked to Rosie. So, Rosie, I do have one comment that has come in, and I'm not quite sure how much you're going to like or dislike this. Is what community tech do you think people should use? Now, we talked about this briefly. Now, I know we've talked about the grounding of, like, you don't need community tools to build a community. But let's say you've done very similar to what you have, and you've built that community up, and you're looking like, where could I host that community? Let's say they don't necessarily have the funds or the liquidity to build something custom. What sort of tips would you give?
Yeah, I would say that they should go where their people are. So for me, I went to Indie Hackers. I was hanging out and working there. That was quite convenient. I was on Twitter. That's like where people hung out. And then I would start basically stacking the tools bit by bit. So, get a domain, get a blog or website, start an email list, start building stuff up from there. And then, from there, I would do what I now call it MVC, which is a minimum viable community. And I would experiment. I would maybe host an event, something like, host something on Zoom, for example. there's all kinds of ways you can connect. You could do an AMA on Twitter, you could do it on Reddit, you could, wherever it might be, just like find places to like test your ideas, and then build it up from there. So yeah, I mean, I wouldn't specifically recommend a specific tool, but I'd recommend experimenting and trying things out and seeing where that goes, and most importantly, seeing what the people are like saying or responding to.
Sure, 100% agree. And like just talking about where people are, I mean, recently Twitter has brought out Spaces, of course, to kind of compete with Clubhouse and what. I mean, I'm interested to hear your views and opinions of, you know, I've got a couple of questions around this. So one is, if you have a community on Clubhouse, but you prefer to use Twitter and you have actually more followers on Twitter, should you migrate your Clubhouse followers to Twitter? What do you think about that? So people that maybe have more followers on Twitter but have built up a presence on Clubhouse.
Um, I mean, for ethical reasons, I would say go to Twitter, because I'm a bit like that. There's there's issues with Clubhouse that they don't address with moderation and stuff like that. So, but putting that to one side, I mean, I guess it depends, right? So you can use both, but it gets a bit, it can be hard to do both. But if that works for you and you can maintain it, and people are showing up and attending, do both.
Mm.
And see how you kind of feel about doing both. See if it's the right, are they like the same kind of people that are showing up on both platforms, or are they different? And that could lead you down very different paths. You could have a very different experience on Clubhouse than you do on Twitter. Like, the vibe is quite often different depending on the platforms, and you might decide, well, maybe you like the Twitter Spaces vibe a lot more, and then you might double down on that. Or you might decide to keep both and keep going. If it provides you that kind of satisfaction and growth, then why not? And I kind of call that like growing communities in parallel. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that, as long as it works. It works for you, and the people that you're trying to connect with are the right kind of people. Because that's really what matters at the end of the day, is like, are they the right kind of people that you want to have in your community?
Yeah, sure. I mean, there's been a few people that have had some issues with regards to visibility of their spaces on Twitter, and not necessarily being able to get the message out to people. I mean, I don't know if you have any tips maybe for anybody who is thinking about maybe starting their community on Twitter via Spaces. I mean, what tips would you give them maybe to help them get more people who share their thoughts at their spaces?
Yeah, I mean, I would recommend just like not pay attention to the numbers too much. It's like you want to host a good event, and you want to think about what a good event means to you. And we can get carried away with the idea that a good event means having 100 people there, and it doesn't. A good event is bringing value to whoever's there. And I think if we kind of get too focused in on the numbers, especially to begin with, then it's a distraction. So instead of focusing on the numbers, focusing on having a good event and talking about good things and practicing, getting to a stage where you want to practice what you're doing. Audio rooms for most people is still a very new thing. It's only really, I know like Clubhouse was out last year, but it's only really this year that it's kind of like taken off properly for most people. And a lot of the rooms are terrible. They're absolutely terrible.
Yeah.
So I would look into what makes a good event, and what makes a good event for them as well.
So final question, because I know you have a hard end at 7 today.
Yeah.
So what makes a good event for Rosie? What are your top things that if you were that you think about? What makes a top event for Rosie?
Oh, top event is, I think for me, is something where I feel like I've come away and like connected with people, or the people who are in the room have that same kind of feeling where they've learned something, where they've gotten value, where they've perhaps felt like they've been heard and listened to, um, and where they would hopefully feel like, yes, I'll come back to something like this. And some of the best events that I host, honestly, like have 5 people in the room. So and those are my favorite, to be honest. Is like just getting really, I wouldn't say really intimate, but really getting to know people and really getting like past the small talk is when communities like become really special.
Yeah. I mean, I can completely appreciate that. And yeah, it makes complete sense. Well, Rosie, I know you have to shoot off today. And, thank you so much for participating in the session today. And yeah, that's it really from us. I don't know if you have any final words, Rosie, for the audience on community.
I'm good. Just like, follow me, I guess. Keep listening. Keep keep trying to build better communities, and don't get swallowed up with the hype.
Yeah. Don't get swallowed up by the hype. Follow what you want to do. Well, thank you for your time. And I will see you all very soon.
Excellent.
Bye bye.
Thank you.